Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I will make a start as people are entering the lobby. So my name's Shannon, if you haven't joined us before, and I am the Victorian Birds on Farms Monitoring Coordinator and the Interim WA Coordinator. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands in which I'm joining you from today, and that's the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which you're joining from today and recognise that sovereignty has not been ceded. So welcome to our fourth Your Birds on Farms webinar series episode. Your videos will be on today. However, audio will be off, but you'll be able to ask questions in the Q&A and the chat function. Now, depending on how you have entered the chat room today, you might just see the Q&A displayed, or you might only see the chat function displayed, or both. We will be moderating both of them. And I've got some very good birders here to help me moderate today. So we have our Birds on Farms manager, Margot Orobic, and our, g'day Margot, and our Southern New South Wales project officer, Darcy Crease. Welcome, Darcy. Any questions that we can't get to through the chat, we will be answering at the end. And if for any reason you have to leave early today, for anyone, a friend or a relative who couldn't attend, we will be recording today's episode and it will be up on our YouTube Birds on Farms channel in about the next week or two. And I will send an email around to let you know when that's available. So today is quite a fun one, actually, and we're focusing on probably the species that no matter your skill level, you might get confused with, and that is little brown birds. And here to present today is Scot McPhie, and he's our South-East Queensland project coordinator. Now, long before Scott was working for us at BirdLife, I have to admit I had heard his name pretty regularly in Queensland, and that's because he is an exceptional birder. He also is has his YouTube channel Bird Bites, which you can follow on Facebook and Instagram as well. And so I won't hold him up any further. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for that, and welcome everyone to the presentation, wherever you are from around Australia. Wherever you are, there's little brown birds everywhere, so hopefully this presentation will be of use to you. So just give me 1 minute, just while I organise my screen. I'm just going to start sharing now. And Shannon, perhaps you could just give me a verbal confirmation when you see the screen there and ready to go.
Yep, your screen is up, Scott.
Okay, that's great. Now let me just get my little PowerPoint control panel here. Okay, so it's still there. I haven't done anything wrong. You can still see it? Okay.
Yes, we can still see it.
Okay, excellent. All right. So what I'm going to cover today, this is more about giving you the skills. We will look at some specific examples of little brown birds, but what I really want to do today is give you the skills so you can apply this knowledge in your area with your birds. So what I'm going to do in the course of the presentation is, first of all, we'll look at what is a little brown bird and their biology. Then we'll look at their evolution, and it's a bit of a rabbit hole. I don't want to go too far down there, but it does give us some context and explain why they are the way they are and why they're hard to identify. So it's interesting to have that context. Then we'll look at how to identify them, mainly by sight and then by sound. We'll talk about that a little bit. Then I'll show you a worked example of what I do in my area and how I apply these techniques. And then we're going to look at different examples from the different Birds on Farm project areas around Australia. So I asked the different BirdLife staff who work on these projects for some suggestions. And we're going to look at a couple of problematic birds in each Birds on Farm project area. But these birds will be found in more than just one project area. So no matter whereabouts you are, there's a high chance that they'll be relevant for you, even if I've assigned them to a different project area. So make sure you look at all of that as I go through it. Then we'll have a challenge where I'm going to play a video of a little bird and we'll just see how you go as far as identifying it. And then we'll look at some other resources that can help with identification of these birds. And as I was saying before, it's really about giving you the skills and the ability to identify more little brown birds in the field and then to identify all of them back at home once you can get into some guidebooks and things like that. Okay, so what is a little brown bird? Let's look at some of the basics of their biology. So when you look at the words little and brown, it seems rather obvious, but when you actually break it down, it tells you a fair bit about them. So being little, they need protection, either foraging in amongst plants, or they need plants close by that they can retreat to if they forage in a more open area. And because they're small, they have a high surface area to volume ratio. Any three-dimensional object, doesn't matter if it's a bird or a mammal or whatever it is, the smaller that thing is, the higher its surface area to volume ratio is. So the more that it loses heat to its surrounding environment. And most birds have a resting body temperature of 40 to 45 degrees. So even on a hot day, they're hotter than the ambient temperature. So they're always losing heat. And that means that they've got to feed that metabolism. So they're constantly on the move looking for food. And that's one of the main reasons why they're moving so much. But also being that active also reduces the chance of predation as well. And then when you look at the coloration, brown, so obviously camouflage is a very, very big reason for that. Their small size means that they're very vulnerable when they're incubating or building a nest or feeding. So camouflage is important. But as we all know, not all of them are brown. So sexual dimorphism or dichromatism is a very big thing too. Now, just to explain those two phrases, sexual dimorphism means when one sex is like a different size, different shape. There's something different in the morphology of one sex to the other. Dichromatism means that the coloration is different, but in practice, people talk about when they say dimorphism, they mean different color as well. So that's how I'm going to use it here. So if we look at these examples here, probably all of us are familiar with fairy wrens and robins. And so we have a superb fairy wren at the top, flame robin at the bottom, and the males on the left. And they're very, very different to the females on the right. So this is a product of sexual selection where the females are selecting the males with the brightest colors. And this is an example of the handicap principle. And basically that means that if I'm really bright and I stand out like a sore thumb, but if I can still survive, then I must have a fantastic set of genes and you really want to breed with me. It's a way for the males to advertise their fitness, but it comes about from the females selecting which ones they want to breed with. And so the sexual dimorphism is strongest in breeding systems where females select from a number of males. So monogamous breeders tend to have little or no sexual dimorphism, and a good example of that would be a crested pigeon. There's very little difference between the males and females there, and they're very monogamous compared to something like superb fairy wrens, where you'll have a lek breeding system, and 4 or 5 males will be calling and advertising. The female will select one. So that's a little bit about why they look the way they do. So most of the little brown birds that you see are going to be females, and most will be in the Passeriformes order. And this is perching birds or songbirds. And this is the largest order of birds in the world. About half the species of birds in the world belong to this order. And this is all tied in with their evolution as well. So I just want to show you this chart here. Now, this is a graphic from a study, the world's largest study, genomic study of birds. Almost every bird family in the world was sampled. This was a study that was just published earlier this year. And they not only did they sample the most families of birds, they also sampled more parts on the genome of each of these birds that they looked at than any other study. So it's the most wide-ranging genetic study that's happened. And what I'll do is just draw your attention down to the bottom right-hand corner. So the way this works, it arcs around anti-clockwise. So the scale down the bottom from 0, 20, 40, 60, 80 to 100, that's how many millions of years ago. And if you look at the first dotted line, on the left it says KPG boundary. So that's the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary. So this is 66 million years ago. This is when the Chicxulub asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs. And then that big radiation that occurs almost 2/3 of the way around this semicircle, that's all the birds that suddenly evolved to take up all these niches that were suddenly available because dinosaurs were off the scene. So you have this massive radiation. And then there's a second dotted line, and that's 23 million years ago. So that's a Paleogene-Neogene boundary. And if you look right down in the bottom left-hand corner, this is where the Passeriformes order is. And so these birds evolved only recently, about 23 million years ago. And at that stage, Australia had broken off from Gondwana, had drifted far enough north for the rainforests to have receded. We're now getting into drier weather. We now have fire-adapted environments. This is where our woodlands and eucalypt forests and the arid parts of Australia started to develop. So all of these birds in this second radiation around the Paleogene-Neogene boundary, they evolved with the change in the Australian environment. And so also the other thing that happened at that stage was mammals had got their act together, and there was a lot more mammalian predators now and a lot of selective pressure on these birds by the mammals and their predation. So this is what's driven them to become small and brown and fast and agile and hard to see in amongst foliage and things like that, because they were able to survive by doing that. And if you ever feel bad that you're struggling to identify these birds, don't feel too bad, because you're up against about 23 million years of evolution that have made them this way. So that's basically their biology and their evolution and why they are the way they are. So let's have a look at how to identify them now, just using visual cues to begin with. So it's all about gathering key information quickly, and as you would all know, you don't always get the best look at a bird, so you really need to know what to look for in that little glimpse when you get a chance to. So there's two kind of assessments that you want to make. One is just the broad level, where you're trying to work out what family it is or what type of bird it is. And then there's the fine level, where you're really drilling down into specific information so you can work out what actual species it is. So let's have a look in detail now. So on the broad level, you're just ascertaining things like the body shape, the bill size and shape, the tail length, strong body markings. Sometimes foot structure is important, but you won't always get a good look at that. The habitat that they're in and whereabouts in the habitat they're in, particularly in the canopy, the relation to the height off the ground where they prefer to operate. Their behaviour, and then the geographic location, so where you are as well. These are all the broad level things that you want to take into consideration. And with the location, there's a few factors that complicate that. So some birds are expanding their range, and so for instance, where I am, I'm on the Darling Downs. I live about half an hour north of Toowoomba, and we're finding that bluebonnet parrots have been steadily expanding eastwards over the last probably 20 odd years. So the location maps that you see in the guidebooks can be useful, but you will get birds moving out of that. Pet trade escapees, particularly with parrots. I mean, you've got to think about birds that are likely to be kept and then moved around in the pet trade. So long-billed corellas are much more widely distributed now than they ever were when I was a child, and that's on the back of the pet trade. Then you've got migratory birds and vagrants. So your location is useful, but it's not always too diagnostic, but it's just a bit of supporting evidence. So these are the broad things that you want to keep in mind first. And then we start to look at the fine level. Now, I'll show you a diagram in just 1 second, so all of these terms here will make sense. But you want to zoom in as quick as you can around the head. Look at the beak, the cere, the law, the eye area, and the eye colour. And I'll show you a diagram to point these out specifically. The forehead, tail notching, whether the centre of the tail is longer than the feathers outside, or whether it actually comes in and it's a bit concave. The tips of the primaries, the breast colour, any patterning, striations, the colour of the rump or the vent. So it's these specific markings that are going to give you the information. Once you know broadly, let's say it's a flycatcher, then it's this kind of detail that will help you work out which one it is. So let's look at a diagram of a bird here. So we have an Australasian pipit, and let's start at the beak and we'll work around anti-clockwise from there. So the thing to look for the beak is its general size and shape, and its height or its thickness, and whether there's a downward curve on it or not. So just the general morphology of the beak. Beak colour tells you a little bit more about the age of the bird, particularly if it's an immature bird or an adult. That's not always as diagnostic as the general shape of the bird. Now, the cere is the flesh around the nostril and often just behind the nostril. And on this pipit, it's a very small area, but some birds it's larger, and some birds it's very important. So when you're looking at, say, brown goshawks and collared sparrowhawks, if you get a good look at the cere, that can be the one diagnostic thing that you can trust. But again, you don't always get a good look, so it's just a matter of zooming in with what you can. The forehead, the markings there. The supercilium, now that's just a fancy word for eyebrow. So we can see here that this pipit has a white eyebrow. The eye ring is very important. So that's the fleshy area around the eye. So not just the circular bit, bits to the left and right or front and back of the eye. Sometimes they're bare, sometimes they have feathers. The presence or the extent of and the flesh around the eye ring is very important. The eye colour itself, and most birds you can't even distinguish the pupil from the iris, but if you can, that's a really good hint, the actual colour of the iris. Now, as we go down the back here, the coverts that we've pointed to, they're the feathers at the top of the primaries. These are the primary coverts, and then if we just jump over to the right-hand side there where I've got primaries, so the primaries are the main flight feathers, and typically on a passerine you've got 10 large primaries and then 10 secondaries inside, and they're the feathers that the bird really flies with. So the markings on them can be very important. So you can see here how this pipit, both the coverts and the primaries are darker in the center and lighter on the outside. So those kind of markings are very important as well. Now, this particular bird, the primaries close over the rump, so we can't see the rump, but the rump just being that patch at the small of the back before the tail feathers can be very diagnostic as well. And yeah, the tail feathers, the length of the tail, the shape of the tail, and the markings of the tail. And then as we go around to the front of the bird, the tummy, breast, and throat, again, just general markings and coloration there. And then the law, now that's the bit between the cere and the eye. That can be very important as well in helping identify birds, and we'll see that shortly. So if you see a bird, and let's say you've only got 5 seconds, 10 seconds, you want to zoom in, I think, on the head area the first, and just remember, make a note of as many of these things as you can. Is it a big cere? Is it a small cere? Does it have an eyebrow? What colour is the laural area? What is the shape of the beak? These are all the critical things that you're going to need to make a successful identification of the bird. And if you have enough time, then definitely the primaries and the tail. But it's going to depend with the bird. But in my experience, zooming in on the head is probably the most useful one when you don't have much time. Okay, so if you see a bird, you've memorized some of these features. This gives you enough information to start working through the possibilities, but you've got to remember it does get pretty complicated. So males, females, juveniles, and immatures can all be different. And just to explain that the difference between a juvenile bird and an immature bird, a juvenile bird is the first molt that a bird comes into after all of the fluffy downy feathers are gone. So the first decent feathers that it gets after the down feathers. And some birds will go straight from that into the adult plumage. Other birds will take a series of molts before they get to the adult stage. And a pretty extreme example of that is satin bowerbirds, where it can take 6 to 7 years for them to become, for the males to get their full adult plumage. And so in the interim, they're immature birds, so they'll go through their molts and start to adapt the adult plumage. So it does get pretty tricky, the different stages of the birds, and a good guidebook will actually have diagrams for some, if not all of those stages with each species. Clinal variation across their range. Some birds will be right, well, in fact, generally most birds are larger and colder areas to conserve warmth. You'll get some gradation in the coloration of birds as well. So the one picture that you're trying to compare it to may not be exactly what you're seeing, but it still could be that species. But so what you want to have is what I call a go-to list in your memory of key identifying features that you can use. So that's in order to identify something in the field. But at home, you'll have the luxury of the guidebooks and apps and things like that, or you can have apps in the field with you. But you still got to memorize enough diagnostic information, and you've got to have memorized it accurately or seen it accurately, because if you forget something or you didn't quite see it right, then that's going to not help when you try and identify it. And really, you want to have multiple traits confirmed or matched up before you're confident that you've got the ID right. So don't just jump on the very first thing you see. And we've all done it. You end up feeling like an idiot afterwards when you realize it's not actually this bird, it's that bird. So don't just look for the most obvious thing that jumps out to you. Look in some of the fine detail. So let's look at a worked example. So this is something that I do up here in the Lockyer Toowoomba Birds on Farm project in our area. These are 3 birds that we see very regularly. And unless you know what you're looking at, it can kind of throw you. So I would come across these birds almost every day that I'm out. The center one probably not as much, but certainly the one on the left and the one on the right very frequently. So if I was to come across a bird that looked like this in the field, the first thing I'm going to do, if we're looking at the broad traits, is I'd go, okay, well, it's got a long tail, it kind of sits upright, small round body, it's a fairy wren. And interestingly, the one in the middle of the tail is down, but you can just see it extending away. So you want to have more than just a glimpse. You want to follow the bird as long as you can to get as good a look as you can and what its typical shape and pose is. So in my head, when I come across one of these guys, I'm going, right, it's a fairy wren. And then I go to my fairy wren go-to list, which I carry around in my head. And this is what I go through. So if the law is the same color as the beak, so that's the region from the beak to the eye, and if it's a reddish terracotta color, if it forages in open grass, retreats to hedges, if it's okay in urban environments, and we don't usually find it in forests, then it's almost certainly a superb fairy wren. If the law is a darker color than the beak, and it likes staying in thickets, especially lantana, if it's really on grass or out of thickets, and if we see it more in forests and woodlands and scrubs, then it's a variegated fairy wren. Now, if the law is a similar color to the head feathers, and if the breast is generally whiter, and if it likes foraging in long grass and light thickets, and sometimes you see it in urban areas and on the edge of woodlands, then it's a redback fairy wren. So whenever I see something, I've just got that working list in my head. So whenever I see fairy wren, I've got that working list in my head, and then I just filter through what I'm looking at against that list. So the thing is, the physical traits are more diagnostic than behavioral traits. The behavioral traits can, they're more supportive evidence to help you. So for instance, variegated fairy wrens, sometimes I see them foraging out in the open, not very often, but I do. It's far more a superb fairy wren thing. But you've also got to be aware of mixed flocks, because you might identify one of these as a female of one of the species, but then you find that it's just hanging out with some of the others. You don't want to think that the male that you see in a group is the exact species of the female that you're seeing. You need to be able to identify them individually rather than by who they're hanging out with. So when we apply all of the that go-to list to these birds, you can see quite clearly these features. So here on the superb fairy wren, you can see that the law is the same color as the beak, and it is a reddish terracotta. You can see that the laural area on the variegated fairy wren is much darker, and over here on the right on the redback fairy wren, it's very much the same color as the other feathers around the head. And these photos don't show very well, but the breast on the redback fairy wren is usually much whiter and cleaner than the breast on these other two. All right, so that's how I apply this technique in my local area. So asked all of the other Birds on Farm staff at BirdLife for suggestions on birds in their area. So we're going to go through each different project area now and just look at a couple of the problematic birds and go through what the key features are that you should look for. So this is only a couple of birds from each area. It won't be an exhaustive list. If you have problems with these birds, you might want to write down some of what I'm saying, but these are the key things to look out for. And just excuse me, just while I grab a drink. So let's look at the ACT yes first, and brown thornbills and striated thornbills. And as I was saying, I mean, I get these up here, so that, you know, they're not restricted to just the one project area. They could well be in your area as well. So with the brown thornbill, the thing to look out for is the rufous forehead with scalloping and the heavy striations on the throat and the breast. And so the difference between scalloping and striations is the scalloping it's like a scallop, a shell. It's curved and more or less horizontal, whereas the striations are more vertical. You can see the dark red iris, and these guys are usually foraging closer to the ground at the lower levels of trees. Whereas the striated thornbill, you can see that it's got white striations on its forehead and ear coverts. I didn't actually talk about ear coverts in the diagrams of the birds, but it's the area just behind the eye, the feathers covering where the ear is. It's not too pronounced here, but these birds do have a black stripe that goes from the lower kind of through the eye, then behind the eye. So you might see them with more of a stronger black stripe, and they're usually foraging higher in trees. So the behavior is kind of indicative, but it's not diagnostic. So the main thing that you're looking for here is the forehead scalloping and versus the striations and the colors of the eye. So southern New South Wales and whistlers. So rufous whistlers and golden whistlers. So once you know what to look for, it's not too hard with the females here. So obviously the female rufous whistler is more of a fawny color, and there are stronger striations on the breast, whereas on the female golden whistler, again, doesn't show too well in this photo, but a lot of them have a lighter breast and throat color. And the key thing you want to look here for is, if you look at the primaries on both of these shots here, you can see how there's a rufous kind of yellow edging on them. So even when you see the bird from side on, that stands out quite well. Yeah, they're more of a general grey colour. The eye can kind of appear bigger in the head than it does on the rufous whistler. And, you know, once you're very familiar with these birds, it's little things like that that you notice right away. But these golden whistlers sometimes get mistaken for grey shrike thrushes. And the grey shrike thrush, again, once you know the difference, it's not really that hard. You kind of get it right away. They're slightly bigger, slightly bulkier. You can see that the beak is longer, the eyes are darker, and they'll be gleaning on branches, whereas the golden whistler will be, you know, hunting around foliage for insects. And also notice with the grey striped thrush on the left, the uniform grey colour of the primaries, as opposed to the edging that you can see here on the primaries of the golden whistler. So another great case of sexual dimorphism here. So yeah, just be careful that the presence of males can help, but sometimes, you know, I see rufous whistlers and golden whistlers in close proximity to each other. So you want to identify each bird individually, not by who it's hanging around with, because it could be hanging around with different species altogether. But we can't look at male golden whistlers without looking at eastern shrike tits as well. And this is a great example of not grabbing the first thing that you see. I mean, the first thing that you notice with these birds is the yellow, olive, and then the black and the white. And if that's all you do and you go, oh, great, okay, I've just seen a golden whistler, when in fact it's an eastern shrike tit, or vice versa. So you need to start to drill in a little bit. Don't just take the first thing, get some specific detail and get multiple different things to match. So with the golden whistler, there's longer bill, the throat's white, and it's hunting insects amongst the foliage, whereas the eastern shrike tit, you can see it's got a shorter, heavier bill. It's got white banding on the head, and it's more gleaning amongst the bark, and the bill is built for that as well. And I find generally this photo doesn't reflect it, but generally their heads just seem to be bigger on their bodies than this one. So they seem to have large heads for their body as well. So again, once you get to know the birds, it's quite easy to tell them apart. Okay, central western New South Wales. So brown honeyeater, yellow-faced honeyeater, and singing honeyeater. So these brown honeyeaters are amazing little birds. And the thing to look for there is a yellow patch behind the eye. And you will notice that their bill is just that little bit longer and finer and more curved to get into different flowers than these other honeyeaters. And they have an amazingly loud voice. So anyone who's seen these guys or heard them will know the volume they put out for their body size is incredible. The yellow-faced honeyeater, the diagnostic thing here is just go straight for the eye, or the banding there, the supercilium, then down from there. So black, yellow, black. It's the only honeyeater that has that, and you'll see it's got a slightly shorter, stronger beak than the brown honeyeater. Now the singing honeyeater over the other side, it's also got black and yellow, but it doesn't have another black band under the yellow, and this is kind of set a little bit lower. So it's got the black band goes through the eye here, whereas it's a yellow and black with the yellow-faced honeyeater. But the interesting thing about singing honeyeaters is they're very, very similar to varied honeyeaters up on Cape York and mangrove honeyeaters, which you get right in northeastern New South Wales and on the coast in eastern Queensland. And this is a good example of, you might just look at a bird and go, right, black, yellow, honeyeater, got it. Open up a guidebook and go, wow, it's a varied honeyeater, even though you're out in Western New South Wales. So where the range is very, very different from where you're living, then look again. So don't just rely on that physical similarity, just make sure it's likely to be seen in your area as well. And honeyeaters, of course, aren't cage birds that people have for pets, so they're not likely to have escaped from an aviary or been moved into a different area. Okay, Victoria wide. Yellow thornbills and weebills. Now, I mean, quick look at them. They're very, very similar colouring. But again, just start to drill down into the detail, and everyone should now be able to see the differences. So on the yellow thornbill, there's a bit of a reddish tinge to the chin and the upper throat. The iris is dark, and we've got striations on the ear coverts. Then you go over to the weebill. And the thing I look for in them right away is the bill, because it's such a distinctive shape. It's short and it's bowed up at the top. So look for that. And then you can see the supercilium or eyebrow is just a little bit pale. It has got a pale iris, so you can actually see the more of the eye than the darker eye that the yellow thornbill has, and no striations around the ear coverts. So if you're just going, oh, there's a small yellowy bird, that won't give you the ID. So just looks in a detailed way on the bill and around the eye. Okay, yarrow to yay. Right, so these are really popular birds, aren't they? Very fast insectivores here. So welcome swallows, fairy martins, and tree martins. And the thing to watch for is when they're banking, look at their tail and the shape of the tail. So if we look at the welcome swallow here, when the tail is fanned out, there's a deep fork in it. The outer rectrices are much longer, and you get this concave effect. And we've also got a rufous throat and upper breast colour. And the photo doesn't show it too well, but on the tail there's a bit of a white stripe with banding on each of the tail feathers there. And the rump of that bird is dark. Whereas if you go to both of the fairy martins, when their tail is closed, you do get a light fork in the tail, and you can see that in the top of the two fairy martins and in that tree martin that's just sitting there. But in the bottom fairy martin there, with the tail fanned out, you can see that there's no fork. So it just opens up into a really nice fan. So as soon as you see these birds banking around, if the tail looks like that, then you know that it's not a swallow, it's a martin. But you also got to check other things. So to tell fairy martins from tree martins, the key thing is the crown. So you can see the fairy martin has a rufous crown, but over on the tree martin, it's dark, so a dark crown. Yeah, but they're pretty similar in other features, so look for the crown there. But to tell them and welcome swallows apart, look for the tail. The other thing with fairy martins is they're the only bird in Australia to build a mud nest with a tunnel entrance, so it's a bit like an inverted igloo. So if you see one of these birds hanging around a nest like this, or going into a nest like this, then it's 100% a fairy martin. Okay, Western Australia. Excuse me, just while I grab another quick drink. So I guess by now you all know exactly what to look at here. So um, the inland thornbill on the left, one of the interesting things there is that the tail is more cocked up than other thornbills, and it's got that lovely rufous coloured rump there. The forehead is grey with scallops and then striations on the breast and a red iris in the eye. And behaviour-wise, they're usually seen singly or in pairs, whereas the Western thornbill, and try as I may, I couldn't get a photo that showed the back and the rump, but they're the only thornbill in Western Australia where the rump colour is the same as the back and the tail. So it's uniform in colour all the way down there. The scallops on the forehead, but they're more brown, and there's no striations on the underparts. And you can also see the iris there is white, and they're usually seen in groups. So if you see a group of birds and you want to know what they are, then you should be thinking, well, is it a Western thornbill? And then start looking for some of the diagnostic things there. Or if it's just singly, or maybe just a pair of them, then start going through your own mental checklist about inland thornbills. Okay, so my area, Lockyer Toowoomba, this is something that pops up a lot, Australasian figbirds and olive-backed orioles. Now, I know they're technically not little brown birds, they're more like medium-sized brown birds, but the juvenile olive-backed oriole looks a lot like the adult female Australasian figbird, particularly with the eye being the dark colour there. So the thing that we look for whenever I've got this come up as a question, or whenever I see one of these birds, is I just zoom straight in on the bare facial skin, the skin around the eye. So it's a bit grey here on the Australasian figbird, but sometimes they're even a lightish blue. But there's no feathers, just a bare patch of flesh on the front and behind the eye. That's the key thing for the female Australasian figbird. Whereas the olive-backed oriole, there's no bare skin at all around the eye, and the beak is slightly longer. A bit hard to tell unless you're getting a good look at them. Now that's a juvenile, so by the time they become adults, the males have a red eye and a red beak, so that's easy to identify. But the females will have a red eye and a dark beak, so that also sets them apart from the Australasian figbird. But none of the juveniles or the adult olive-backed orioles will have a bare patch of skin around the eye, so that's what I always go for there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to identify birds by sound. So I'm not actually going to play any sounds. I just want to discuss them because it can definitely be done, and you feel like a champ when you get something right by hearing the call and knowing what it is. But it is a very, very tricky business. So let's just go through some of the issues with it. Okay, so first of all, one species of bird will have multiple different calls, from alarm calls to contact calls to just general chatter that reinforces the group bonding, particularly roosting time and things like that. So there'll be lots of different calls from the one species. You get regional dialects, so you'll get a change in calls of birds, even though their distribution will be continuous at one end. So where I am, about 100 kilometres north of here, the grey shrike thrushes are fairly different to here. And this can also change over time, and that's actually something, again, I've noticed with grey shrike thrushes, that in my yard they've dropped one syllable or one note in their call just over the last year or two. It's still quite recognisably them, but it's just a little bit shorter than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So the calls can change over space and time. Then you can have similar calls from different species. So striped honeyeaters and grey butcherbirds can sometimes sound a little bit similar, and also rosellas. So we get pale-headed rosellas and crimson rosellas here, very similar again. And also if there's a bird in some thick scrub and you can't see it, but you can hear calling, well, or let's say you watched a bird fly into that scrub, don't assume that what you're hearing is a bird that went in there. You really want to be able to see the bird making the call to know that the call is what you first saw. And then, of course, we have duets and imitations as well. So we probably all know the whitbird with the crack sound. That's actually two whitbirds, and the lyrebirds and other birds, of course, are great imitators. But you can get good at it, and it's just really a matter of practicing. So you can practice at home or out in the field. Um, I know all the guidebooks have these phonetic transcriptions. They don't work for me. I guess everyone's individual. I mean, for instance, walk to work. That is supposedly what a noisy pitter sounds like, and I can kind of hear it, but really, you got to come up with your own little phonetic transcriptions. I think that I read them in the guidebooks, and I can't make sense of them. I mean, if you can make it work for you, great. It's a good way to remember them. But you can record the birds in your area and play them back. And if you want to get good quality audio, then you do need some specialized gear. But even just on your phone, if the bird's close, you will get pretty good quality. And the same part of our brain that listens to music and helps us to memorize music is actually triggered by bird calls. So we can actually do it. And it's just by repetition, the same way you learn songs or music. But don't get overwhelmed because there's thousands of bird calls to learn. So just start with ones that you're quite sure on and then expand it out. And now there's a whole lot of apps that help with bird calls, and I'll go through all of them in a tick when we look at different resources. So just out of interest, that diagram on the left there, that's two different ways to represent sound. So this is a channel bill cuckoo call, which I don't think anyone could pick just by looking at that visual representation. But at the top is a sonogram. So that's showing the frequency and what different pitches are being called at any particular point in time. And at the bottom, that's the volume of it. So that's just a normal waveform. Okay, so I thought we'd have a fun challenge now. I'm going to play a mystery bird video. So I'm going to play a short video of a bird. And so imagine that you're out in the field and you've only got, I don't know, 5 seconds glimpse of this bird. It's pretty short. So it's going to play for just a few seconds and then it's going to go to black. So in the chat, I want you to write the key features of the bird that you've seen. So don't tell me what you think the bird is. Just tell me what the features are that you're zooming in to have a look at. And look, if it doesn't play back well, which I think it will, but if the Microsoft servers don't distribute it quickly enough, we have got a YouTube link that we can use as well. So I'll just play that now. And Shannon, maybe you could, I won't be able to see the chat, maybe you could just tell me the features that people are describing in the chat when they see this.
Sure thing.
So,
and I have a backup of that YouTube link as well if it doesn't play, ready to go.
Excellent. Okay, great. All right, so here we go. All right, just a snippet. Now, did that play okay, Shannon?
It did. It was a tiny bit patchy, but I think we should be able to identify some good features from there.
Okay, so everyone
I've got a couple coming in. Sorry to interrupt you. Yellow rump, rump, ground dwelling.
Right.
Another one says rump, primaries edged, striations around the eye, yellow belly, yellow rump, striated head. Oh, they're all coming in fast. Black stripe through eye, striped primaries, and white markings on face.
Excellent. Well, that's really good.
Another one, small black bill. We've got to add them all in there. Small black bill.
Wow, you guys are awesome. This is great. So I've just prepared what I thought could be some responses or discussions around them. So let's look at the broad detail. So we've got shape and small size. So paseriform, possibly. Foraging on the grass in an open area. Well done, whoever suggested that. Then on the fine detail. Now, no one suggested spots on head, which is really good because that's one of the significant things that people are likely to look at and then go, oh, is it a pardalite? They could possibly get led astray by that. So I've highlighted that to show don't just grab a really obvious thing and run with that. You want lots of other details. So we've got a bright yellow rump, dark tail, bill shape and colour. Colour of the primary feathers, lack of spots also rule out pardalite, as does a foraging technique. Now, did you guys hear the bird call? Did anyone hear the call that was on that audio, or did that not go through? You getting
No,
any?
audio didn't come through, Scott.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, look, it was a trick anyway, because there was a magpie like calling in the background, which I don't think anyone will fall for that. But again, just because you hear it, don't think it's the bird you're interested in. So, all right. So put down in the chat now what you think the bird is. So Shannon, if you wouldn't mind reading out the suggestions.
Should I let? Oh, yep, they're all yellow-rumped thornbill.
Yay, well done. That's awesome.
Yep,
Okay,
straight
I mean,
onto it. Well done, everyone.
yeah, I mean, look, it's a bit easy. It's a very distinctive bird, but it's a good example because the markings are so strong there. And if you recognize right away that that was a yellow rump thornbill, that means that in your brain, you've already got this little neural network that leads you down a path that says yellow rump thornbill. You've already gone the broad information and the key specific things, and it's taken you to exactly what the bird is. And if you can do it with that one, you can do it with a huge number of birds. It's just a matter of knowing what to look for and recording it accurately, and then either having that go-to list in your head or a whole lot of bird guidebooks. And it's just practice and repetition that embeds it in there. So well done, everyone. That's great. It's really good everyone got that right. So I'm just going to run through some resources that can help people. We're blessed in this country to have so many guidebooks. But the key thing when you're reading the guidebooks is to read the text descriptions methodically, because that will often reveal detail that isn't always in the diagrams or the photos. So you really want to sit back and read the descriptions, the actual text, really methodically to make sure it matches up with what you've seen. And just remember, unless your observations are accurate, it's not going to help. So it doesn't really matter which guide you use. They're all fantastic. Three of these are the Compact Australian Bird Guide, the Field Guide to Australian Birds, and Morecambe one second from the left, and the Slater Field Guide right on the right. They're all compact guides, so their job is just to help you with an ID in the field. The other ones, of course, the Ciro Australian Bird Guide, Pizzy and Knight, Simpson and Day, and the Morecambe Guide, they're larger, and of course George Adams' photographic guide. They're heftier. They'll give you a lot more information. And it's interesting, the George Adams book, which I think is a great book, there's a lot of really good text and information in there too, but sometimes photos don't. It's funny because sometimes you want to see a photo to help with your confirmation of the ID, and other times photos are a bit limited because it all depends on the position of the bird and things like that. So then you want to these other books, which are based on paintings, and the advantage of that is they can position the bird or show exactly what they need to help with ID. But then sometimes you want to look at a photo because the painting's not quite right. Yeah, and just for the record, I love the paintings in the Simpson and Day. I just think they're fantastic. Okay, and so now we have apps, and there's a huge range of apps. Some are paid, some are free. The row across the top, they're there to help you identify birds. The row at the bottom, those three apps are to help you with logging information. So the PK Birds of Australia and the Morecambe Birds of Australia are based on those guidebooks, and they have extra information. They'll have photos, not just the illustrations. They'll have bird call recordings. And then David Stewart's Australian Bird Calls, that's a very good one as well, but that's all audio. It's based around the audio. Then you have Merlin and BirdNet, done by Cornell University in the USA, and Merlin will allow you to take a photo or record some audio and upload it, and its AI will analyze that. Now, the problem with photo, like it's on your mobile phone, so you've got to be close enough to get a decent photo on the mobile phone. But the AI recognition on photos is not too bad. The AI recognition on audio is still a developing space. But I've been playing with BirdNet lately, and it's really good, and it's free, and I would really recommend that if people want to give that a go. And the way it works, again, it's just on your mobile phone. You record a bird call. So you'll record, say, 20 seconds of sound. Then you highlight the 3 or 4 seconds of the bird call and press submit. And what it does is it breaks it up into 1 second chunks, and then it runs its AI over each 1 second chunk, and it votes on what it thinks the most likely bird for that 1 second is. and then the bird that gets the most 1 second chunks is its recommendation. And it's been very accurate so far, just with the birds on my garden that I've tried. But I like how it's breaking it into the 1 second chunks, because what it's doing is it's avoiding the issue of the change in the bird calls, and it's just looking at the tonal qualities of the call itself. And so bird calls are largely a learnt behaviour, and so they can change over time and space, but the birds are making the sound in their syrinx, which is right down in their chest, and there's much less change going on there within a species than there is between the learnt aspect of the call. So they're basing it on the tonal qualities, and yeah, it's worth playing with. It's free. The PK birds, Morecambe birds, and the Stewart bird calls are all paid. Then down the bottom, we have Bird Data, eBird, and iNaturalist. Now, Bird Data, of course, is BirdLife's platform, and eBird is a similar thing, and of course, it's huge worldwide. But not just because I'm in BirdLife, I really recommend Bird Data, because the way it records information is far more scientifically useful than eBird. So eBird's not bad, but Bird Data just means there's more we can do with the information. So if you're looking at recording your sightings, I would definitely recommend Bird Data, but nothing against eBird either. And iNaturalist, of course, is used for a lot more than just birds. And again, it's got the issue of you need to be able to get a decent photo. It's based around photos. And I just want to say something just about the pre-recorded bird calls. So those top three will all play back recordings of these birds. Now, that is a huge issue if you play that back to attract birds. That is a terrible thing to do, because it can completely stress out birds. It thinks that their territory is being invaded. It can even put them off nests. There's just no need. I know some people do it for to call birds in for photographic reasons and things like that. It's just unconscionable. Just don't do it, please. It can create a huge problem for the birds. What you need that playback feature for is to just play it softly in your ear, out in the field, not loud enough for the bird to hear it, but just so you can compare with what you're hearing in the field with that actual recording to help guide you. Okay, I see we're getting close to the end, so I'm almost at the end here. We'll just go through a few more resources. Cameras are great. They don't have to be high quality to be of use. It's more about getting the key information. I use a video camera a lot. Now, that little picture that you can see down the bottom, that's a still of a video of a olive-backed oriole. Now, I was doing surveys a few years ago in Deongwa State Forest, which is, we've just found out, is not going to be logged anymore, which is fantastic. Very important bit of habitat in South-East Queensland. And we were recording birds there. That bird might have been 200 metres away. It was a long way away in the top of a tree. And with our binoculars, we couldn't work out if it was a Australasian fig bird or an olive-backed oriole. So I just pulled out the camera, zoomed in, got a really crappy image, but you can see by the red eye colour there, the shape of the beak, it was enough to tell us that it was an oriole. So camera traps are great for secretive birds, nocturnal birds, but yeah, even your mobile phone. It's all about just generating enough information for you to make a successful ID. It's not about getting a perfect, beautiful bird shot. And video I like because it records a lot more behavioural information than just stills will. A few other resources. So online, Xenocanto is a fantastic repository for bird calls. You can get hundreds for different species. It's global. It's not just Australian. So, I mean, if you bring that up out in the field, same thing. It's not an app, it's a web page, but same thing. Don't play it back loudly. But the interesting thing here is you can see in the center column that all the locations are recorded. So you can pick a location close to you to help you confirm whether or not that's a bird. And then on Facebook, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of bird groups, which is great because it shows how popular birds are. But you've really got to watch the accuracy there, because there are some experts in some of these groups and there are some amateurs who think they're experts. So you've got to be pretty cluey about what advice you take from some of those groups. But certainly you'll see hundreds and hundreds of really interesting bird photos and be able to chat with like-minded people in any of those groups. Okay, so quick recap of techniques. It's pretty straightforward, really. It's about getting key information accurately, looking at specific features, and then comparing that to resources, so mental go-to lists or guidebooks and other resources. But you should also remember the 80-20 rule, and probably everyone knows this. It's the old thing about, say, a salesperson will get 80% of their income from 20% of their customers. So likewise, you're going to get 80% of your problem sightings are going to come from 20% of your birds. So you just need to get to know the problem birds in your area, and then you'll become quite a whiz. So if you look at bird data, so now I'm looking at the online version. So the app is for putting the information in. Then if you go to the web page, just Google bird data and then press explore, you will get a map of Australia. And this is where we display the information that everyone puts in. So this is where you can access all of these sightings. And if you see on the left there, there's, well, if you look in the middle, I've drawn a polygon around a town here called Yarraman. There's a polygon tool on the left. You just click that and it allows you to draw on the map. And so it's restricted all of the results just to what's in that area of that polygon. So if you see on the right-hand side, in that particular area, 195 species have been sighted. So that can help reinforce what's in your area and give you an idea of what you should be looking at if you're a little bit unsure. Now, if you're on a property, say one of our Birds on Farms properties, and there's only been a handful of surveys done in your immediate property, then draw a polygon in a larger area, your neighbours or the general area where you live, but make sure you select the same type of habitat as on your property. So it's a really good way to just see roughly what it's most likely to be. But then remember, there are the issues with vagrants and migrants and, pet trade birds and range expansion. But if you want a working list of what's in your area, go to bird data, go to the explore feature, and then use the polygon. And that'll give you a good starting point. So it's all about practice. It's like playing guitar, riding a bike. The more you do it, the better at it you'll be. But actually doing it really cements it in, like it just gets imprinted in your mind so much more strongly if you learn a new bird in the field while you're doing a survey. And look, I've got to do a quick plug. We're right in the middle of the Great Australian Bird Count right now. Finishes on the 26th of October. So that's a great way to practice. And it's a lot easier than doing a structured survey in bird data. Just 20 minutes counting the birds that you see. And the app for the Aussie Bird Count will also help you identify the birds too. So you may all like to practice doing that. And this is really important for BirdLife because it gives us information on private properties. I know Birds on Farms is doing this, but for people who are here who aren't part of the Birds on Farm project or a volunteer or participant in it, the data that we get from the Aussie Bird Count gives us information from all sorts of locations that we normally can't access. So if you think about it, if you're just a birder who's keen on going for birds, you're going to go to national parks, state forests, roadside reserves. It's all these things that are publicly accessible, but there's a huge amount of land that's all private that we don't have access to. And this project, the Aussie Bird Count, gives us a lot of information about birds in areas that we normally don't have access to. So you can go and practice your little brown birding skills for the Aussie Bird Count before we finish on the 26th. So that's it. These are just the photo credits. So thank you to everyone who allowed their photos to be used for this presentation. And if anyone wants to read more about that genomic study that I was quoting with the evolution of birds, just hop on Google and just type in complexity of avian evolution revealed by family level genomes. You may not get the actual paper, but you will certainly get articles written about the paper that summarize it. So if you want to read in more detail about the evolution of birds, then that paper is the most up-to-date place to start. And sorry, it was last year. I think I said this year. It was last year that came out. So that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
I think most of the questions were answered in the chat as we've gone through. But
Excellent.
if
Okay.
anybody has a last one, feel free to chuck them in now. But I have to say, Scott, that was an incredible webinar. I forgot for a while that I was actually meant to be moderating and doing things on my computer because I was just enthralled in what you were saying. And I picked up a lot myself, as I'm sure everyone did who joined us this evening. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's a
Um,
pleasure, and I'm very glad I've done it. And you know what? Before I stop sharing my screen, Margot will kill me if I don't show the very end slide with her beautiful picture there. But yeah, so just a plug for BirdLife. So join us, volunteer, or donate. Um, yeah. Okay, should I
Thank
stop
you.
sharing my screen now?
Yeah, sure thing,
Yeah,
Scott.
that's
And
great.
I did see that a few people come into the chat a little bit later today. So just to reiterate, this is being recorded. It will be available on our Birds on Farms YouTube channel probably in the next week or two, and we will send out an email once that is up. And going back to what Scott was saying about using the explore function in bird data and using those polygons, for anyone who struggles with anything like that, just know you can reach out to the coordinators, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to do that on your behalf if it's going to help you. And with your identification, we are definitely here to support you along the way and help as best we can. And I think we might wrap it up there unless Margot or Darcy want to add anything. We're just on that 8:30 mark.
I was just going to say, Scott, I've been moderating the chat, and there's one question that was specifically for you because I don't use
Uh-oh.
BirdNet myself.
Yes.
So Rhonda had a question, and it was, is there a way of getting sequential data on BirdNet that you can analyze when you have internet?
Sequential data on BirdNet. Oh, so you mean record it and upload it later?
I think so, yep.
Yeah, okay. Yes, you can. You can do that via their web interface. And I know the audio moth recordings on the Powerful Owl project, some of them are analysed that way, if not all of them. So, and also, you know, often you're out of range when you're in some of these properties to look at the birds. You won't have mobile coverage. So you can record it and upload it later through their web interface. You don't have to use the app.
That's good. That's great because, yeah, I haven't used BirdNet before. So it was definitely a question specifically for you.
I've only been using it for a few days. We surveyed last week, and one of the volunteers was showing it to me. And I was very relieved that what I was visually saying, he was confirming on there because so we had a double confirmation. Everything that I thought I saw visually, BirdNet confirmed with the bird calls as well. So that was a good feeling.
Yeah. I mean, Madeline had a good comment. She's recorded the call on her phone and then played it out loud to BirdNet on her husband's phone. So that will
Perfect.
stop you having to have, you know, your computer ready. You can just play it back to somebody else's phone.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
All right. I think that's all the questions that we've had in the chat. So yeah, it's been fantastic, Scott. Thank you so much for this presentation. And
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
yeah, Shannon, I think it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining. And we will be in touch in a few weeks' time to let you know about our last Your Birds on Farms webinar for the year. So keep an eye out for that. And happy birding, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
See you
everyone.
all.